Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Beech. I'm the Member of Parliament for Burnaby-North Seymour, and I'm the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard. I want to thank everybody for being here today for this important announcement. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'm glad to be here with my neighbor, the Member of Parliament for North Vancouver, Jonathan Wilkinson, also our Minister for the Environment and Climate Change, for this very important announcement. Those of us here in Vancouver know well that the effects of climate change affect our everyday life. If you're looking for evidence of that, today you only have to look up to the sky. We are currently facing the world's worst air quality, and it is a direct cause of climate change with the fires burning in the United States. Our government is committed to supporting Canadians working to find solutions and implement changes that will help to make our communities greener and more sustainable. We need Canadian ingenuity if we are to become a net zero nation by 2050. Supporting Canadians is not only an opportunity to help protect our environment, it is also an opportunity to create the high-paying, good-quality jobs of the future. And that is why I am so excited to be a part of this announcement today. So without further ado, Minister Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Terry. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis très heureux d'être ici aujourd'hui. I am certainly delighted to be here. Certainly delighted to be back in Vancouver for this announcement. I would also like to begin by acknowledging that we are hosting this event on the traditional and ancestral territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Nous vivons une période hors de l'ordinaire. La pandémie de la COVID-19 a causé beaucoup de pertes et d'incertitudes ici au Canada et à travers le monde. Les Canadiens ont démontré beaucoup de résilience et de détermination face aux défis. We are certainly living in extraordinary times. The COVID-19 pandemic has created tremendous loss and tremendous uncertainty here in Canada and certainly all around the world. Canadians have been deeply impacted by COVID-19. They have shown tremendous resilience and determination in the face of hardship. Our government continues to take decisive action to ensure the health and safety of Canadians and to provide the supports that they need to keep their businesses running and to put food on the table. Here on the West Coast, these challenges have been coupled recently with the deadly wildfires that are raging in the U.S. that have filled our air with smoke. As Terry Beech mentioned, this past weekend, Vancouver had the worst air quality in the world. Just as we did for COVID-19, those of us who live here have had to limit our activities, this time to protect ourselves from the smoke. Unfortunately, we can expect more of these extreme weather events, given the hotter and drier summers that we have been having and will almost certainly be having going forward. 2019 was the second hottest year ever recorded. In fact, the last 5 years are the warmest on record. We are seeing changes in other parts of the country too. This year, communities around the Arctic Circle saw unprecedented warming that may end up being the hottest on record since 1885, when record-keeping began. Melting sea ice is changing the way of life for Inuit peoples, who have relied on it for hunting and gathering for thousands of years. These weather-related events underline the importance of fighting climate change, and therefore of today's announcement. Countries around the world need to give themselves the tools to better understand the effects of climate change and build the capacity to take bold action to mitigate emissions and to adapt to the effects of climate change. Les pays à travers le monde doivent se donner les outils pour mieux comprendre les effets du changement climatique et les actions à poser pour réduire nos émissions dans le but de s'adapter aux impacts du changement climatique. J'ai le plaisir aujourd'hui d'annoncer un nouveau fonds qui nous aidera à y arriver. Today, I'm pleased to announce one such tool, the new Climate Action and Awareness Fund, an investment of $206 million. This funding comes from the existing Climate Action Fund, as well as significant investment from the Environmental Damages Fund. The Damages Fund, as many will know, collects fines from polluters who violate Canada's environmental laws and invests them in environmental protection. It ensures that environmental good follows environmental harm. The new Climate Action and Awareness Fund will target 4 key areas: creating youth awareness, engagement, and action, community-based climate action projects, advancing climate science and technology, and supporting academia and think tank organizations to better understand and support our transition to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. We know that by taking bold action and by partnering with Canadians and communities right across this country, we can and we will reach our ambitious targets of exceeding our current Paris Agreement target for 2030 and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. As we will do so in a manner that promotes long-term economic growth and job creation, certainly we are all aware that the global shift towards a low-carbon future is creating enormous economic opportunities. As we build back from this pandemic, we must rebuild an economy and a society that is stronger, more sustainable, and more resilient than before. We must reflect on what it means and apply the lessons learned during the pandemic to fighting climate change. Today, as part of the announcement of this new fund, I am also very pleased to open a request for proposals for community-based climate action projects. We will be investing up to $50 million of the $206 million in community-based projects over the next 5 years. Engaging local groups and communities in directly combating climate change is extremely important. It is something that local organizations across the country have been calling for. Examples of these climate action projects would be an active transportation campaign to get more people walking and biking, implementing nature-based climate solutions that protect nature and reduce carbon pollution in your local community, or a local climate action created by an Indigenous organization. Investments like today are just one part of Canada's comprehensive climate plan. It is a plan that has put us on track for by far the biggest carbon emissions reduction in Canada's history. Nous avons appris pendant la pandémie que des petits gestes individuels peuvent avoir des effets positifs sur la santé d'une communauté, d'une province et d'un pays. C'est vrai aussi dans notre lutte contre le changement climatique. Nous devons travailler ensemble pour créer un avenir plus vert et prospère pour nos enfants et nos petits-enfants. We learned from the pandemic that small individual actions can have a positive effect on the health of communities, provinces, and the country as a whole. The same is true with individual climate action. By working together, we can create a greener and a more prosperous future for our children and for our grandchildren. Thank you very much for joining us here today. And happy to take questions. I know there are some media on the phone.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. The first question, la première question, Carl Mayer, National Observer. À vous la parole, please go ahead.
Hi, Minister. Thank you for taking our questions. You've talked in the past about using the revenues from the Trans Mountain pipeline to pay for clean energy projects. This week, there was some very weak oil demand forecasts from both BP and the IEA. How worried are you about TMX making enough revenue to pay for all the things you wanted to pay for?
Well, as you said, Carl, the commitment was that all of the tax-related revenues associated with the pipeline, once constructed, would be used to flow into green energy projects and greening of the economy. That commitment remains the same, and as we move forward, we certainly intend to fulfill that commitment. In terms of world energy demand, I mean, there are certainly lots of different forecasts, as you will have seen from different agencies over the past couple of weeks, and certainly from some of the major oil companies. And I would say that, you know, I think the collective understanding is that we are going to be going through a transition over the next couple of decades. Certainly, we all recognize that we need to get to the point that we are not using carbon polluting fuels if we are going to achieve net zero by 2050. But clearly, we are going to be moving through that transition. Presently, we have about 3% of the cars on the road that are zero-emission vehicles. The others use oil as gasoline. We need to ensure that we are aggressively moving in that direction of more deployment of zero-emission vehicles and gradually reducing all of the emissions associated with transportation. But that will be a process of a number of years before we see that come to some conclusion.
Thanks. And I wonder if I could just ask a second question about the protection of forest and specifically old growth forest. The BC government has recently deferred logging in 9 old growth areas. Do you think BC is pulling its weight enough in this area, or do you think the province could do more to protect old growth forest?
Well, I think BC is working hard on their forest management plans. That relates to certainly to old growth forests and how you ensure appropriate protection with respect to those kinds of things. I think it also relates to sustainable forestry practices, which are obviously pretty critical to addressing some of the declines that we're seeing here in British Columbia and across the country in terms of biodiversity. And so those are obviously conversations that are largely for the provincial government. But I would say that as it relates to biodiversity, the federal government has a very strong interest in ensuring that we are doing the things that we need to do collectively between the provinces and the federal government to protect and to recover iconic species like boreal and southern mountain caribou.
Thanks.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press star 1 if you had a question. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. There are no questions registered at this time. Nous n'avons pas de questions pour le moment.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everybody.